I kind of think he's going to get traded. And I'm going to be honest with you, where my mind goes first, if I'm the I'm on the phone.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Welcome to the opening bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers joining you spontaneously. I know that we said for the Fixing the Jets episode that was probably the only episode that we were going to be able to do this week. But when the former number 4 overall pick in Anthony Richardson gets benched and sends ripple effects throughout the entire league, well, this is a draft podcast. We got to talk about it. Connor, how you doing, my friend? You ready to dive into the most divisive topic in sports right now?
I am. It's crazy. It's, it wasn't shocking when it officially came down because Steichen wouldn't even commit to him at the presser to open the week. I think it was more shocking when he wouldn't commit to him. Right. Considering not only where they drafted this guy, it's almost, you knew the instructions manual when you drafted him kind of told you this could very well be the case. But at the same time, I understand some of it where you got a locker room that you got to serve. I've covered a similar situation, and I think Richardson was better at times than Zach Wilson, but there was times where, the Jets wanted to continue with Zach Wilson's development, and Robert Saleh knew he had to kind of do right by the rest of the locker room and give them the best chance to win. And it feels like the Colts have run into a situation where, I did Sims Unbuttoned today, and Chris made a really good point to me. Like, they also see these guys in practice every day, and then the team gets a feel of what they're dealing with their backup quarterback. And Joe Flacco, we don't see him in practice, but the times we have seen him play this year, this Colts offense has performed better through the air. So you're right, Trevor. It is a very, very divisive and complicated and convoluted topic and decision overall.
And I think it's a topical one here for this draft podcast, not only because we're going to talk about, investments and development and things like that, but there's another quarterback in this draft who I like quite a bit, Jalen Milroe, who now all of a sudden you sort of have these same conversations about, right? I mean, like before you could kind of defend it. You say, well, if Anthony Richardson can go in the high in the draft, well, why can't Jalen Milroe? Well, if Anthony Richardson's already getting benched, that's not a good case for how high you take a guy like Jalen Milroe. We can get into all that stuff. There's a lot of different angles here that I want to get into. We'll talk about sort of where the Colts are, where the Colts could go from here, some short and long-term visions that they might be going through. I also want to talk about, hey, there's a reality. When you bench Anthony Richardson, there's a reality that he does not play for the Colts again. And I think the reason why he is benched, play goes into it. I think one play in particular means the most, and it's the one where he was tapping the top of his helmet. Which
I think so too.
We'll get to in a second. But if there's a possibility if he's not going to be on this team much longer, whether it's maybe before the deadline, which would be super fast, or maybe this offseason, I'm going to talk about some landing spots. I want to talk about some landing spots of where I actually think Anthony Richardson should go, because I don't think the dude's career is over. I really don't. Just to kind of like catch people up to speed, I mean, now we don't have to spend too much time on this because I think everybody knows it. The Indianapolis Colts lose to the Houston Texans this past weekend. They dropped to now 4-4 on the season. It was a close loss. It was 20-23. It was at Houston, so it was a road game. Richardson in this one, 10 for 32, 175 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, at a 55.4 PFF grade, but 4 big-time throws in this game, with 2 of them being drops and 1 turnover-worthy play. Now, Richardson's completion percentage, I think Seth Galina had this stat that he sent me, out of like 747 quarterbacks since 2010. Richardson's like third worst in percentage.
He's in very rarefied air in a bad way.
First in average depth of completion. He's first. So it's crazy. Whichever side of this Richardson debate you are on, you've got evidence to your side. And that's why I wanted to have this emergency podcast here with you, Connor. What are your thoughts here? Obviously, I want to hear your thoughts on the play. You kind of talked about it a little bit there. I would love to hear a little bit more about when you kind of covered Zach Wilson being in the locker room and kind of that dynamic there. I think that's very important. But also, we've got to talk about him tapping himself out of the game, because it was something that when we watched it on the broadcast, you go, that's a little weird. That doesn't happen with the quarterback position. And then right after the game, you got your starting center, Ryan Kelly, who's like, yeah, we talked about that. And essentially, I'm paraphrasing here. He was a lot nicer about it to the media, but he was basically like, that shit doesn't fly. We're playing.
Yeah.
We're tired as crap. We're playing through pain. We're playing hurt. That shit doesn't fly. We don't tap out. Neither can you. And you feel like that was the message that he probably said to Anthony Richardson at the time, and maybe why Richardson isn't the starter right now. But Connor, love to hear your thoughts, my friend.
Right. There's always a long road to get here. And I thought Ryan Kelly's presser was super interesting because he stood by Richardson, working hard and being a young player, but he also stood against that play and by saying that's not a standard, that we set here. Like there's a higher standard set here, and you got to learn from that. So this wasn't a situation in any way, shape, or form that the locker room revolted against the starting quarterback. Like, let's just make that clear. It feels like one where, and Joe Flacco has been really supportive of Anthony Richardson. This is such a different scenario when Flacco felt like he still had something in the tank and Lamar Jackson was breathing down his neck. And Flacco, I think, didn't really want to let go yet then. Now Flacco, with the way he's bounced around, but to be fair, like rebirthed his career, he's the guy that doesn't mind being a mentor and playing when needed. And Flacco has been very, very supportive of Richardson getting these reps and saying he needs to get reps. So this was fully Shane Steichen reading the room and saying that, like, hey, we got to do, what's best to win games. And the Colts are also in a unique situation all the way up top. I mean, Chris Ballard has been there since 2017. There's not a ton of GMs around the league, or not an overwhelming amount of GMs around the league, that have been running a football team for the better part of a decade now.
And he's gotten an insane amount of tries at quarterback.
Yes.
I know a lot of them have been veterans, but like that is them benching Richardson. I don't think there's any way Ballard survives this.
Well, that's
given the way that it's gone.
So he's 58 and 64, and is a lot of wide range. It's not like Ballard has just been this 8-9 GM. I mean, they were 4-12, 10-6, 7-9, 11-5, 9-8, 4-12, 9-8, and then now 4-4. Mm-hmm. It feels like they've had some really low points, and then they've also had just mediocrity where they haven't gone very far in the playoffs too. They haven't made it past the divisional round, right? So that's a long time to build a roster, and you pointed out the most important part, Trevor. A lot of different chances to get the quarterback position right, and this was his swing. So I don't think, number one, by the way, that the Colts are actually giving up on Anthony Richardson or that he'll be on a different team next year. And my reason being is, one, this is kind of what you signed up for. There's just a circumstance where the team is ready to make the playoffs this year, and Flacco gives them the best chance to win. Anthony Richardson is 3 months younger than Shedeur Sanders right now. He is 22. He doesn't turn 23 until May. He needs to play football. But he also is coming off a year where he had season-ending shoulder injury last year. He didn't really have a real offseason to get things right mechanically and work out and improve.
Well, he looked bad in the preseason, remember?
He did. He looked like a guy that was just thrown right back into the fire and wasn't, he did look really bad. You're right. And that injury really set back his development, because I think that first offseason for any quarterback coming off their rookie season is vital. And he really didn't have that because of the health concerns. So this, to me, I don't think they're giving up on him, because quite frankly, what are the Colts going to do next year? So we talk about all these teams that need quarterbacks. This quarterback class is not like last year's. And last year's, we knew Caleb was going to play. We knew Jaden was going to play. We knew Drake May was eventually going to play. Penix was a very unique situation. I mean, there's a world where Penix goes to the Raiders or Vikings and he's playing right away. You throw that one out the door. Obviously, Bo Nix is playing. J.J. McCarthy had such a good summer. Sam Darnold's played well, but McCarthy was going to push Sam.
Right.
Do we really think 6 quarterbacks or rookie quarterbacks are start? And Spencer Rattler has already played this year, by the way. I mean, let's be real. Shedeur is probably going to play as a rookie. I think Cam Ward's going to play as a rookie. I don't think Jalen Milroe should play. I don't think Quinn Ewers should play.
Yeah, sure.
Carson Beck. There are teams that just won't have options this offseason. So
right.
The Colts are going to win a good amount of games. They're not going to be picking to get one of those guys. So all in all, I think Anthony Richardson, they try to get this right with him next year, but it does create an awkward situation. And I do think it's one that this is a coach that feels like he's got to win right now, and he's got a chance to win right now, and he pulled the plug. And I guess that leads us to the combo about the final straw, which was being tired and coming out for a play.
Yeah, and look, I think that if they're benching Anthony Richardson because his play wasn't good enough, I think that's asinine. I think that's crazy. Because to me, you're stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies.
Yeah, that's fair.
What's Joe Flacco going to give you? The wild card and a wild card loss? Come on, let's be real about it.
You're not winning the Super Bowl.
What's the best case scenario with Joe? The best case scenario with Joe Flacco is maybe you win in the wild card round. And maybe that's enough for you. Because people are talking about, okay, well, you're coaching for people's jobs and you're coaching for, Chris Ballard's job or something. And dude, there's so many layers to this, right? But from Richardson's point of view, if you're benching him because he's not playing well enough, like if you want to say to yourself, well, you got other guys in the locker room to think about, and I'm not talking about the him tapping himself out. We'll talk about that more in a second. I'm just focusing on his play because I think people go, well, he's not playing well, he's not completing the ball well enough, all this kinds of stuff. I'm not saying it's perfect, but for you to draft Anthony Richardson where you did it, number 4 overall, knowing that he had 1 year as a starter at UF, with a coach that had just come in too, by the way. He was going through a coaching change of when he was there, committing under Dan Mullen, and then it goes to Billy Napier. So you're going through a coaching change, and it's your first year as a starter. Your rookie season, you played 4 games before missing the rest due to injury. By the way, you also went through a concussion. You don't have the full offseason to be able to practice probably the way that you want to. And now you're going to pull the plug on him because you're 4-4? Get out of here.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's...
What are you talking about? And so anybody that looks at this objectively, Richardson's not playing well enough to have the job, that's malpractice of you drafting, you not understanding the player that you were drafting. Now, I had to say all of that because I don't actually think that's why he got benched. Because Shane Steichen himself said, a lot of really good reporters who report on that team and follow that team daily, they have tweeted Shane Steichen was the guy who pushed for Anthony Richardson. Shane Steichen wanted Anthony Richardson in the draft. After they drafted Anthony Richardson, Shane Steichen said the best way to get better is through reps. So there's no way that he's totally going back on that right now, 10 games into Richardson's career as a 22-year-old. The reason why he got benched is because he tapped out of that game, in my opinion. And
I think so too.
And I also don't think that the locker room, I sort of agree with you. I'm not in the locker room. This is all speculation. But it sure doesn't sound like the locker room was ready to mutiny against the guy. I think it might have just been the offensive line was that pissed off.
I think they were too.
And that is the strength of this football team. Because you listen to some of the clips of Josh Downs when they're asking him about it. Josh Downs it's not like he sounds thrilled that Anthony Richardson's not the starter anymore.
And he's been way better with Flacco, specifically.
Right. And he's not really thrilled about Richardson. At least he doesn't sound like it. Maybe he's just a stonewall dude with his emotions. But Michael Pittman Jr. also, so I saw this. Pittman now obviously hasn't played well over the last couple of weeks with Richardson. They haven't had a great connection, but I saw a tweet that was Pittman found out that Richardson got benched on social media because there wasn't this big, team meeting or something like that.
Right.
So to me, it makes me feel like the offensive line, and I'm not blaming the offensive line. I get their frustrations. I want to be very clear about that. I understand. As the quarterback of the team, even for Richardson throwing a 300-pounder off of you and then scrambling or whatever, buddy, that's not an option. It's not an option for you to tap out. You're the quarterback and you're the leader of the team. Everybody looks to you. You can't be doing that. But to me, it's the reason why I'm bringing that up as a response to sort of what you said of you think that he could certainly be on the team. You don't think they're getting rid of him. It gets very tricky now because let's say Flacco doesn't get hurt. Let's say Flacco plays most of the rest of the season. Even maybe 2 games left or something, Richardson might come in. But let's just say that let's say that Flacco plays the whole rest of the season. Richardson comes back next year and you go, all right, Anthony's learned, he's matured, he's our guy, he's great. Now you're in year 3 of him as a quarterback. You think he's going to look that different? You think he's going to look that different coming into next year?
Sitting there.
Without any experience? I don't. So instead now, Start of year 3, guess what? He's still going to look green. He's still going to look inexperienced. And now you're going to have every question come up of whether or not he's the guy. And I don't even know if you go into next year with just him as the guy. You're probably going to bring him a backup at that point.
Well, you have to because of his injury history.
It's just so ugly to me if you do keep him. And it makes me think that whether it's before the trade deadline, which we'll get to in a little bit, or not, I don't think he's the long-term answer for this team anymore because of how this was sort of handled. What do you think?
I think it's tricky. I think it feels that way, but I just don't know what the pathway to an answer is, right? Are you going to give up on Richardson's talent before year 3 to go out there and, I mean, God only knows what, bring in Jacoby Brissett? Like, for real. What the hell are they going to do?
This is why this is so crazy to me.
It seems very short-sighted to me. And I know this league has really changed, right? We had this conversation a little bit on Fantasy Football Happy Hour today, where if you look back, and sometimes and sometimes you don't, like back 20 years ago or even shorter than that, quarterbacks had such a longer road, man. They really, really did. I mean, you look at David Carr. David Carr started 5 years for the Texans and was never good. He was, now don't get me wrong, they got him absolutely demolished, to be fair to David Carr. But they really waited it out to see what he had. Eli Manning is one of the most interesting cases to me. And I know Richardson is a very different prospect profile. But Eli was not really, it felt like Eli really didn't figure it out, I thought, until year 4 or 5, I would say. And he was still throwing a lot of interceptions up until about that 5th year. So the window, look at Bryce Young. And now Bryce Young is a different scenario because I didn't think Bryce Young ever really showed anything. I think I can find plays of Anthony Richardson where I go, man, there's about 6 guys in the NFL that can do that. Sometimes 3.
Look, was his tape against the Texans perfect? No. I think there were a lot of really good moments in that game. Anthony Richardson gave them a chance to win that game. If A.D. Mitchell gets 2 feet inbounds instead of 1, they win that football game. If Goodson catches that front pylon bomb beauty that Richardson threw him, they win that football game. Maybe we're not even having this conversation. He had so many good throws in the game. He had 4 big-time throws.
Yeah, and they were, like you said, I mean, the one drop that was Pittman, right? Or no, it was a couple. I'm literally rewatching them right now. There was a couple drops that you just can't drop. Like,
right.
They're perfect throws. They're absolutely perfect throws. The Goodson one was egregious, in my opinion. You're right. This feels like there's something larger here that I know it was a really rough start to this game. I think he was 2-15 at one point. And maybe he does need a real refresher because mechanically, when he's not throwing the ball down the field, it looks like he is just aiming a shot put almost. It's awkward. It's weird. It's never, in rhythm and comfort. Everything just looks like he has no idea where it's going to go from that 5 to 15 yard range. And maybe they feel like they need to actually reset that here. In terms of the player as a whole, like, I don't think Anthony Richardson, yes, the tired thing was an immature moment. He's a really, grounded guy, hardworking guy. Like, you're not worried about that side of things with him. I think he's just really far away right now. And I think when they drafted him, he was really far away with a lot of upside. But that's the nature of the position right now. And you're right, Trevor. This all kind of comes back to how is this going to impact how teams evaluate some quarterbacks going forward as well. And I think it will.
I want to talk about maybe some potential landing spots because I think it's worth the conversation. As we sort of talk about the 2025 NFL draft as well. But I'll sort of wrap up my thoughts and say this. Like, I wonder if they don't think, like you said, like I from what I had heard about Richardson, like hardworking kid, obviously like all the talent in the world, everything
everyone
like
loves the person.
I mean, I wonder if they actually think that. Because to me, certainly like tapping out of the game is one thing, but I even look at how crazy that tap out play was and think, you don't give up on your franchise quarterback even just for that play. Are there other moments throughout practice, like you said, that we don't see in the game, work ethic wise, whatever, where like there were little doubt? I don't know. I do not know this. Please don't like quote me on this.
I think they just think he's broken fundamentally. That's what I think.
That's just, I am not saying that you're wrong. If that's why they're benching him, it's crazy. It's crazy to me, especially given what you knew you signed up for when you drafted him 4 overall. He's 22. He started like 8 games in college. He started 10 games now.
He started 23 since high school. 23.
I cannot get on board with the play. I can't. If you tell me that he's got some maturity things that he's got to work through, that's a different story that I cannot speak to. But if you tell me it's because of the play, I cannot agree with it. I think that is such a bad process if that's why they're moving on from him.
It is a bad process, though. Like I truly think it's a bad process. It's a little easier for people like us to sit here and say that, though. I do think it's got to be hard being in the head coach's shoes. Once again, I've been close to it. Mm-hmm. I don't think Robert Saleh wanted to bench Zach Wilson. And when Zach Wilson, after they lost to the Patriots at New England a couple of years ago on a walk-off punt return, and he didn't take accountability, Saleh reevaluated things and they got back Wednesday.
I remember that.
Yeah, yep. It was the year before they got Rodgers. They got back Wednesday, and Saleh had to bench him because he had to look the other 52 individuals in the eyes.
And I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I think the situation is here. And when a player loses, even a young player, when he loses that forward, because you remember, it felt like Zach Wilson was saying all the right things after that. It did
change him a lot.
It felt like it really did change Wilson after that, but it was too late.
It was too late.
And I wonder if it's too late with Richardson. I wanted to get into his potential landing spots if we do think that he could potentially move on. But before we get into that, best part about football season, checking out the post-game stats, right? Which wide receivers have more than 2 touchdowns, which quarterbacks have more than 300 yards, which running backs have more than 75 yards, all this kinds of stuff. If you think you know what's going to happen before kickoff, play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Select between 2 to 6 players and just choose whether they will have more or less of a single stat. It is that simple. For first-time Pick 6 players, you can check this out. New customers, they bet $5 on your first Pick 6 set. You get 50 in Pick 6 credits. There's a lot of games going on. Obviously, like you focus on the Colts if you want. If you think Michael Pittman Jr., he has not been fed nearly enough, so his numbers are probably a little bit down. If you think he's going to have more than whatever the stat says, that's an example. There's plenty others throughout the NFL season. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use promo code PFF. That is promo code PFF for new customers. Play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits for free. Only on DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. If you've got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 is not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits do expire within 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.promos. Or no, sorry, it is pick6.draftkings.com/promos. And this episode is also sponsored by our friends over at BetterHelp. If you think of a time when maybe you're wearing a mask, a costume, something like that, Halloween, October, it's the season for that. But sometimes people feel like they're wearing a costume and a mask in their real life. You know, when they're with their family, at work, social settings, whatever it is, therapy can be a great way to help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you don't feel like you are wearing a costume and you got to be something that you're not. I've been doing therapy for over 1.5 years, and that is exactly something that has really helped me out. It has helped, honestly, like, made me feel like my strengths can shine even brighter. And it's something that I have really enjoyed doing. I know that you can as well. It's not just for people who are struggling with something specific, although if you feel like you need to talk to somebody professionally about something, it is great for that. But it can be a great, useful tool to better understand how your mind works, you know, why you react to certain things the way that you do, and become more aware of your patterns. You can make the most out of your strengths. You can even improve some of the areas that you would like to improve with. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's convenient, flexible, and entirely aligned way to get therapy that is right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You can take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/NFLSE to get 10% off your first month. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/NFLSE. All right, Connor, I do want to talk about some landing spots here because I think there is a legitimate chance that Anthony Richardson, I don't want to say like has played his last down for the Colts because like if the season doesn't go well and, they're out of it by 2 games, Richardson could come back in at the end of the season and maybe he does stay and maybe they can figure it out. But I think the margin for error for that's pretty low. I kind of think he's going to get traded. And I'm going to be honest with you, where my mind goes first, if he's getting traded at the deadline.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
All I'm saying is, if the Colts would be open to it, which I don't think they would be, if I'm the Giants, I'm on the phone. I'm calling them. Look at what these other quarterbacks have gone for. Zach Wilson went for a 7th round pick. Actually, what was it? Wasn't it like a pick swap? It was like a 6th and a 7th, basically. So Zach Wilson goes for a pick swap. Trey Lance goes for a 4th round pick. Justin Fields goes for a 6th. Mac Jones goes for a 6th. Kenny Pickett goes for like a 4th and a pick swap after that. Malik Willis went for a 7th. Like these quarterbacks, once teams give up on them, you can get them pretty cheap. Again, I don't know if the Colts are in fire sale mode with Richardson, but if I'm the Giants, I'm going to figure out whatever the price is. I love the thought of Richardson getting to go to Brian Daboll and play in Daboll's offense because you know that Daniel Jones ain't the answer. So if you have the opportunity to get Richardson on a tryout for like a mid-round pick, like a 4th round pick, and you get 8 games to evaluate him before you go into this offseason and maybe go draft a quarterback, Connor, I like that, man. I like that scenario. So if there's any chance at all, like if I'm the Giants, I've already picked up the phone. I've already called the Colts today to figure out what the price is. And if it's too high, hey, it's too high. It's fine. But if there's any chance that he gets dealt before the deadline, if I'm the Giants, I got to figure out what that price is. That's the landing spot that I like the most if he's going to go anywhere.
I do too. From a schematic, hands-on approach, Daboll working with a guy that's got obviously no one is Josh Allen, but there are some similarities in terms of Josh needing to learn how to throw a couple off-speed pitches when he got into the league from Wyoming, how to use his running ability, making him just a smarter player. I'll say this. If the Colts trade Anthony Richardson for a 3rd or a 4th round pick, they're out of their fucking minds.
I agree.
I
agree.
This isn't Trey Lance status yet, Zach Wilson status yet, Justin Fields status yet. Maybe I'm just holding on to traits, but I think they have totally fumbled this entire process if that's the road they go down. I would need some kind of draft asset that I can package with my 1st rounder to go up and get a different quarterback. Like that just has to happen for me if I'm the Colts. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you're going to get a 1st round pick for him, but.
And I was going to say, I don't think the Giants would give you anything close to that. All I'm saying is I'd pick up the phone. I don't hate the marriage of Brian Daboll with Anthony Richardson. But I'm with you. I think that'd be crazy if the Colts did it. But if you're giving up on him because of maturity reasons, like if you don't think that he's going to get better, if you think this isn't salvageable, maybe you are looking to move him before the deadline. But you nuts. Would be nuts. It'd be crazy. But if you're moving him maybe in the offseason, a couple of teams I might like. Rams, potentially, depending on what happens with Matthew Stafford.
That'd be a really interesting fit. We've never seen McVay with a quarterback like that.
But McVay has been running power running concepts more over the last 2 years. I don't think that's not within McVay's wheelhouse to incorporate that in a quarterback that might be able to do it with Richardson, although, of course, he's been banged up when he's been a runner. But the other 2 that I like, Seattle is one of them. The Seattle Seahawks, I think, are a team with, depending on what they do with Geno Smith, because it feels like they haven't necessarily been as committal as I thought that they would be with Geno. Felt like the Seahawks were kind of interested in Anthony Richardson during that 2023 NFL draft. And so I feel like the Seahawks are definitely a spot that could make sense. And then the other spot, I'm not going to lie, I totally forgot. Now I blanked in my head. I can't remember. The other
team,
you
had the Giants, you had the Rams in Seattle.
Those are the teams that I like the most.
Can I guess this?
If you can guess it, it'll probably trigger it in my mind. So yes, please do.
This is actually pretty tough. Would it be Miami?
No, although that's interesting.
Because God, do they need a backup right now? I
hate that.
Yeah, for me, it would be...
Oh, I know the other one.
Okay, fire away.
It's depending on what happens this offseason with the Steelers quarterback situation.
Yes.
If there's going to be a team out there that would take a flyer on a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, we have seen that the Steelers are a team to do that. So I have the Steelers.
What do you think of, though, the concept that, like, and he's going to be owed money, so it's a little bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Fields feels like a further along version. Fields runs. Fields is a better thrower.
What you're saying, like trade him straight up?
No. If you're the Steelers, wouldn't you want to just bring back Fields? And I know they benched Fields, but I think they liked the progress he was making. They just saw a higher ceiling for the offense they wanted to run with Russ there on a 1 year. So, but I could be wrong. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
There's a lot of teams that make sense. I think if he gets traded, and once again, I don't think he will, I think he needs to go somewhere to be a backup where he is developing to eventually have a chance to start. That could be, there's a lot of different places. The Giants, he'd play right away, I feel like, in that situation. The Rams, though, Stafford could come back next year, and he plays behind Stafford. That one, it's so interesting from a schematic approach. I'm trying to think who else would be. Yeah, Miami I'm fascinated with because McDaniel is such a creative run game designer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny. He'd go from having one of the most physically limited quarterbacks in the league, although Tua is very smart the way he plays and accurate, and I'm not taking away from Tua, going to a guy that has the most physical traits in the world, but is not playing, in rhythm and with timing. And it would be just a total juxtaposition. Here's one. Well, no, it's just too early to put him in that scenario. But if I was them, I would do this.
Okay.
If I was the Commanders, I would want him
just as the backup.
Well, Jaden Daniels has a pretty significant injury history, and thank God he's been, largely healthy so far. But you could do the same things. But the more I thought about that too, I got to give Jaden Daniels more credit than I have. He's been very comfortable just taking 5 to 8 yard throws over and over again with accuracy and timing. And that's been Richardson's biggest problem. So I kind of walk that one back. The running side exists, but they're so different. And Jaden has adjusted to an NFL offense way better than I ever thought, way quicker than I ever thought he would, while Richardson has not.
I want to say Matt LaFleur just because of what he's done with Malik Willis, right?
Yes,
like if Malik Willis isn't on the team, I think that's fantastic. But hey, we could be getting way ahead of ourselves. We would love to hear from you guys. It's a crazy situation with what's going on. You tell us, why do you think Anthony Richardson was benched? Do you think it's the play? Do you think it was him tapping out? And is this situation salvageable? Do you think he's going to be on the Indianapolis Colts in a couple of weeks, in a couple of years? And if you don't, let us know what teams you think could be interested in Anthony Richardson, where you would want to see him play. Best way to do that, youtube.com/@NFL Stock Exchange. If you could like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. We'd love you for it. If you're listening audio only, @Tampa Bay Trey, @Connor J. Rogers. It's a good way to get in on the show and make sure that your opinions can be heard here. Connor, you got anything else before we get out of here?
No, glad we were able to get this one in. It's very topical. It relates to a situation we see over and over again in this league, is that we evaluate and follow and project quarterbacks into this league. And this one happened just a little quicker than we thought. So I was glad we got a topical episode in to cap off our week.
It's wild, man. And we're going to continue to have this conversation about, just the overall, how you view these young quarterbacks. We all love to say, oh, he'll be 20 on draft night. But then sometimes we don't love the fact that they're 20-year-old human beings and still have a little bit to grow, not just in the game, but as human beings. I think that a lot of that gets lost on this as well. We'll keep having that conversation with Richardson and a lot of these other young quarterbacks that, man, have so much pressure when they get drafted high. And we know that that's going to be the case every single year, 2025 obviously included. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. We'll see you guys next week.